Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Tim Scott Uncancelled with me, Tim Scott. Hope you like that intro there. It tries to cover some of the points that we cover on the show. So welcome again. Good to have you back with us. And whoever you are, wherever you are, and however you are watching. And one of the ways that you can watch, folks, is via YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you type in the search box, Unprecedented TV, you'll find us, not just me, there's other great shows as well. And if you can give us a cheeky follow or a subscribe, that would be very much appreciated. Make it a lot easier for you to find out what we're up to. Well, folks, what times we live in. There's a large scale, or what appears to be a large scale uprising in Iran. Wouldn't it be wonderful to see the end of the Ayatollahs? Although we have to caveat that, of course, that we don't want what happened in Libya when Gaddafi was deposed and the whole country descended into chaos. But we wish that country well, and it deserves our thoughts and to be in our prayers. And I'll tell you who's got the best coverage on Iran is Tusi TV. Mayar Tusi TV, Tousi, Tusi TV. If you search or Google it, you will find it. That seems to be, it's an online, it's not on your traditional television. That seems to have Iran's best coverage. Closer to home, we have the pubs under threat. COVID has hit hospitality hard. Not just pubs, restaurants, hotels, cafes, how some of these places are still going. I don't know. In fact, the problem is, of course, some of them aren't. And it's been one thing after another with pubs, smoking ban, national insurance, employees' national insurance going up most for the kind of perhaps lower paid, casual, temporary staff that pubs would employ. But of course, for many people, it's one of their first jobs and gets them into the habit of working, hopefully a lifetime of working. Minimum wage going up. And now we hear that Labour are thinking of reducing the drink drive limit to the European level for England and Wales, 35 micrograms per 100 mils, 35 down to 22. And they're doing it on road safety grounds. Well, Scotland reduced to the European level in about 2014, and there's been no evidence from there that it actually saves any lives. And I think, frankly, you should be able to go out and have one medium strength pint, or if you're having a meal, have a small glass of wine, not have to worry about whether you might or might not be over the limit. Just another example of the kind of problems that we're facing in Britain and the kind of issues that we have. So a constant theme of this show is how much Britain has going for it, but in what a bad state we are. I recently read a very interesting interview, I think it was in The Spectator, with the American entrepreneur and investor Peter Thiel, founder and co-founder of the likes of PayPal and Palantir, saying that he felt that Britain had the best room for improvement, the best opportunity for improvement of any European country. Of course, when you say things like that, there's always a bit of an implied rebuke, a bit like my old school reports, could do better, must work harder. And those were just the politer comments. But Peter Thiel's absolutely right. Britain, bearing in mind who we are and the assets that we have, Britain is definitely underperforming. But as ever, we move on. We have a guest. Very, very delighted to have Stephen Balogh on with us on the show today. And Stephen, chairman of the SDP, the Social Democratic Party. Stephen, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining us on Tim Scott Uncancelled.
Delighted to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Our pleasure, Stephen. Just tell us a little bit about the SDP. I think some of our older viewers and listeners will remember you guys from back in the day, and I'm delighted to see that you're still going. I've been aware of it. The likes of William Clouston and Rod Liddle seems to have a few good things to say. But just remind us about you guys and where can people find you?
Yes, I can give you a thumbnail sketch of the SDP. As many people will know, those who may be a similar generation to me, that it was founded in the early 1980s in reaction to Labour moving left. For very heavy hitter ex-cabinet ministers formed the so-called Gang of Four, and formed the SDP. It flew very, very high in the early 1980s, high water mark in 1983. It combined with the Liberals in an alliance. 1987, partly because, of course, the electoral system was more disappointing. And then most people think the SDP story ended there with a full merger with the Liberals to form the Liberal Democrats. But there was a rump, let's say, of SDP stalwarts under David Owen in particular, who didn't join that merger, who carried on. It is fair to say that it went down to quite a low ebb. But in the last 6 or 7 years, really since William Clouston took over the leadership of it, it has been roaring back into life. There was a reinterpretation of its principles. It's very much a party founded on community, family, community, and nation. It has a scrutinite bent to it. The idea of place being very important, the idea of nation being the upper limit of reasonable sovereignty. So to bring this little description to a close, we are in cultural terms, we're small c conservative. Traditional values, you might say broadly, but we have a sort of centre-left approach to economics. We believe in a strong and competent state, not a large state by any means, but a strong and competent state, which can help to reinforce these notions of community and national solidarity and so on. So that's where we've come from, and that's where we are now.
And just finally, Stephen, thank you. Where can people find you online?
Well, sdp.org.uk is our website address. In the matter of a small number of weeks, our website will be updated and refreshed. Yes, all of our policies, all of our principles are there. And unlike actually sometimes the other parties, we are proud to pronounce what we believe and what we say. We know that other parties sometimes lift our policies and take them on as their own. That's not a bad thing if they're actually enacted. But yes, we are what we say on the tin, very much.
Good stuff. Okay. Thank you for that, folks. So yes, sdp.org.uk, and great to have Stephen Balogh, their national chair, on the show. Okay, so we've got, as ever, we've got some good stories for you today, on the show regularly, and we look into the newspapers. We look beyond the front page, and behind the front page, we go out and buy the newspapers, get the papers, so you don't have to. So let's have our first story, and this one is been a bit in the news lately. Be interested to hear what Stephen has to say on our first story here, which is to do with the BBC. This is from The Guardian. BBC will stay on Twitter X to try to resist the flood of global misinformation. The BBC's Director General, Tim Davie, has said he will not be taking the broadcaster off Elon Musk's social media platform X. Well, thank goodness for Elon Musk. With Iran, as I mentioned earlier, with Starlink, his internet, satellite-based internet provider, which, as the Iranian government has taken the internet off, but it's still operating via Starlink, saying its presence, the BBC's presence on Twitter X, is needed to resist a flood of global misinformation. Stephen, do you trust the BBC to give us the right info?
Well, in looking at this story, I want to say, in a flurry of bad news stories for the BBC, I would count this as a good news story, a common sense story, common sense breaking out. And I want to say, I don't think I've done this very often, but to praise Tim Davie for that direction setting. I mean, I would say the narrative that he brings along with it is somewhat questionable empirically. So whether the BBC's presence on X would actually reduce the amount of disinformation or increase it, as it were, what the net effect on overall content would be. But I don't mind what his reasons are for being on X. I think it's a good thing. I think the BBC can contribute to the news agenda, and it should be very much held to account for how it goes about displaying its news agenda. So absolutely fantastic that they're staying on.
No, I'm glad too. And, I wouldn't be uncritical of the BBC, and I would like it to move to a subscription model. I think it will have to move to a subscription model to survive and thrive, because so many people these days, particularly younger people, are not watching traditional linear television. The BBC is losing license fee payers all over the place. So I would wish the BBC well, although I wouldn't be uncritical. I think it does have its biases, but it is part of Britain's global influence. It's our so-called soft power. Wouldn't mind a bit of hard power too, you know. But one thing he mentions in this article, or that the Guardian mentions in this article, is that Twitter X is facing a backlash over a wave of images of women and children with their clothes digitally removed. I have to say, I am quite active on Twitter X. This to me sounds as dodgy as anything. You can get. It doesn't sound to me a particularly good thing. I mean, there is a sort of bikini there, I believe. It's not completely nude, but you can take the image of a woman and then sort of press a button, and suddenly she's wearing only a bikini. I mean, that to me doesn't seem a particularly not a nice thing to offer or to take part in. And for goodness sake, I hope he takes it down before Labour use it as an excuse to ban the platform. Stephen, do you think Labour are trying to squeeze social media and recreate it in their image?
Well, I think there's a lot in that story to unpack, isn't there? Yeah. I remember, almost decades ago, the internet. Those who, as it were, invented the internet wanted it to be used for educational purposes and transparency and propagation, and people stuck cat videos on it. That was the running joke, that the entire power of the internet was about cat videos. I mean, this is altogether more sinister. Obviously, this is part of the ongoing challenge of new technology enabling purveyors of pornography and so on. And X, like all platforms, has a battle on its hands. I think the argument is that the new Grok AI, apparently being a little bit more liberal and a bit more permissive, allows more content to be generated. So obviously there's a rebalancing that's very much needed. We can't, I think, trust, as it were, ordinary users of X without some due restrictions for the sake of others, if not the users themselves. So I think it's really important. I do read that Grok is very quickly getting to grips with it. It's putting in stronger filters and so on, and that's very important. But at the same time, I really would take issue with the UK government and others using it as a reason to try to ban X entirely. That's the substance of recent news stories, and I do think it is in the end, it's an excuse to try and cause trouble for what is a very, very commendable free speech platform that so many people rely on these days. 10 to 12% of the UK population rely on it for their news consumption. So that's a sizable number, and it is growing. So I whilst noting and agreeing with your point, Tim, that these things very much do need to be controlled, they mustn't be used as a reason for ultimate censorship.
No, quite right too. And I think that there's that wider concern that we can go into another time about free speech being squeezed more widely. Okay, thank you. Let's go on to the next story. So that story was from the Guardian. This story is from the Daily Mail. And this is an ironic story about fossil fuel, about Ed Miliband and fossil fuel use. Blow for Miliband as fossil fuel use increases. The UK increased the amount of electricity produced from fossil fuels last year, despite Ed Miliband's drive for net zero, legally binding net zero by 2050, a millstone around our necks, in my opinion. The proportion of power generated by gas and other dirty fuels, it says, increased for the first time in 4 years, according to analysis of government figures. Stephen, how are we going to keep the lights on?
Well, on a wing and a prayer, according to the current policies. There's so much. There are so many contradictions in current energy policy, but it does. The sort of keeping the lights on is really a wing and a prayer, particularly this time of year. We're lucky, actually. The storm in early January sort of filled a gap that the so-called Dunkelflaute normally has, which is the enduring calm, no wind, and of course not much sun in the for solar, and it has to be expected that in early January last year and the year before, there were definite Dunkelflauters, which mean that you need two systems in place. You need, you have your renewables, but you need basically 100% backup. I think there was a time last year in January in 2024 when 2% of national energy electricity output was from renewables. So it's a complete nonsense to have two systems in place. Which makes the whole system more expensive anyway. And even this year, there's people will be generally aware these days of the so-called electricity margin notices and capacity market notices, the system of signalling that capacity is running out. And on the 8th of January this year, the government had to, or the electricity system operator had to put out a sort of effectively an emergency notice that was only rescinded because this storm blew in. So it's no surprise, actually, that the targets for 2030 are being stalled. And I know that this story was in part triggered by a consultancy called Stonehaven that put out a report basically saying we're not on track. We're not on track to 2030, and there's nothing in government policy that's actually going to help it at the moment. That isn't sufficiently going to help it.
Stephen, to what extent do you think we need to be, in inverted commas, on track? I mean, does the evidence on climate change and global warming justify the huge cost, do you think, of legally binding net zero by 2050?
Well, so very clearly the climate is changing, that we have seen a change in weather patterns. I think there's an open discussion about the extent to which it is human generated as opposed to natural ecosystems, solar and so on influences, but it's unarguable that we are. What I think is that having a dogmatic approach to targets such as they are, whether global or local, I think it's misconceived. It's misconceived because what it does is to set aside or downplay too much other considerations to do with quality of life, about the health of the economy of our nation and others. And by having it so set in stone as to be incapable of flexing is a huge problem. I mean, as a party, we're advocating, in fact, a pragmatic suspension of some of the net zero objectives and a temporary reallocation of resources to building up capacity, particularly nuclear, but some gas and even coal in between, through our energy abundance green paper that we published in September. We said we say the only way really to close the energy gap, the only way that we don't have to go out and whistle at windmills as Windy Miller did back in Camberwick Green days that some people will remember, is a hard-headed approach on the way to carbon, decarbonisation very much, but being pragmatic along with it.
Yeah, I think, Stephen, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I would call myself a climate questioner, and I think legally binding net zero by 2050, I mean, we're not even sure if it's even possible, and it's going to be at huge cost, and we have massive energy costs, which of course will be another cost for pubs, as I mentioned earlier. I think you're quite right in this current spell of cold weather to point out that we've had quite a few sunny days and we've had quite a bit of wind. And, that's helped move things along. But we have had very cold weather before where there's no wind and it's overcast. And we have come quite close to the edge, as you quite rightly say, Stephen. Okay, thank you. So talking of the weather, let's move on to the next story, which this is from the Express. And I don't know how many kids are getting a day off school today or this week. What's happened to snow being one of life's great joys? There's been a lot of snow recently and more snow forecast for the next week as well. Stay indoors, danger to life, transport chaos. As storms sweep across the UK, the usual panic about a slight drop in temperature sends the country into paroxysms. I think that's a posh way of saying difficulty. I'm reminded of a time when waking up to a soft blanket of snow was considered one of life's great joys, James Innes-Smith writes in The Express. A time when children built snowmen whilst their parents looked on. I'm thinking of the snowman, the snowman, you know, walking in the air, that wonderful cartoon and song. As drab neighborhoods were suddenly transformed into powdery paradises.
There's a lot of alliteration in that article, isn't there?
All the P's.
Yes.
All the P's there, Stephen. Can we cope with a bit of snow, Stephen? What do you think?
So, well, we should be able to. I've worked in Canada in my time in Toronto, and there was a time when it was -26, -28, and the roads were clear, the traffic was moving, the subways were working. Absolutely enviable. You know, the Canadians manage more extreme environments than we do. Britain has traditionally, I think, had a slightly patchy reputation. The snow always seems to catch us, or dealing with the snow seems to catch us by surprise. I'm slightly ambivalent. My wife loves the snow. She has that the sort of snowy-eyed view, as it were, from childhood of snow days and school being off and so on. I mean, maybe I'm a bit too hard-headed and pragmatic. Snow is a menace. It can be a menace to human life through accidents and through sheer cold and inaccessibility. So they're not in the end great conditions. But I don't want to take away from the fact that there is something beautiful about a snowy landscape.
There is.
And I was, like so many people, I saw that tweet from Dale Vince just before Christmas, the sort of bar humbug tweet about get used to having no snow anymore at Christmas.
Oh,
you know,
yes.
that'll learn them. And I have a feeling this is nature's way of getting back at him by giving us an abundance of snow, at least during Christmas tide, let's say, if not on Christmas Day.
Yeah, there were the doomsters, you know, Al Gore and Inconvenient Truth telling us, you know, we'd never see snow again.
Yes.
You know, so it's it's an interesting one. I mean, I had great pleasure in breaking open the ski box or the ski gear box the other day and getting out my long johns. In fact, we went to see the local football team round here, Division 1, and you know, it was a icy afternoon. Of course, we were sitting there for the whole game. I did have my long johns on and my ski gloves, but we don't seem to be able to cope, Stephen. We have a temperate climate, you know, so we're told, you know, due to the Gulf Stream. We just don't get snow that often, do we? I guess in Canada they're used to it. Would that be right?
Well, yes, I think so in the end, and there, I mean, it is one of the sort of traditional British complaints, isn't it? A flake of snow and the whole country stops. In our area of West London, we had several black ice days. We're on the north side of a hill in West London, in Ealing. And a few years ago, they took away all of the grit bins because of probably an economy measure, but their excuse, their reason was that the sand was being stolen too often. Who knows? But what it means is that parts of our area, which never get gritted, we're not on a main track, were extremely icy, and there were several quite bad accidents. So whether that, I wouldn't say that's incompetence of the local council, but it's a consequence of decisions made, that there wasn't even the possibility of self-help to keep the roads free for the number of pensioners that there are in the area, and they were effectively housebound for a few days. Yeah.
Well, I think there's more snow forecast and more cold weather and high winds forecast. Okay, well, let's move on. And
before, just one thing, one thing it does do, I think, is bring out neighborliness. It's a very, there's an upside. In our area, we have a very buzzy WhatsApp group, which is for, situations like this, unusual situations, and we all look out for each other. We say, is anyone stuck at home? How can we help? So I think anyone listening to this, how are they helping in a snowy situation? Looking out for their neighbours.
No, thank you, Stephen. Very good point. And particularly if you've got elderly neighbours, good opportunity to go around and check on them. Okay, yes. No, fair point there from Stephen. Okay, well, let's move on to a country where I wouldn't imagine they have much snow, although I did read somewhere that they do have an indoor ski dome. And we move on to our next story, and it's to do with the United Arab Emirates, a Gulf country. I'm sure they're having much nicer weather than we are right now. Now, this story is from the Times, and I had to do a double take when I read this story and sort of read it at least twice to sort of understand that it really was saying what it's saying. It's a quite extraordinary story. And I give it added credence because it's in the Times. Whatever you may think of the Times, it's not exactly regarded as Britain's most sensationalist newspaper, to be pretty sort of fact-based. Yes. So this story, UAE restricts students from UK over Muslim Brotherhood fears. The United Arab Emirates is restricting students from enrolling at British universities. So that's their students coming here, just to be clear. The UAE is restricting students from enrolling, so its own students, from enrolling at British universities over fear that campuses, i.e. our campuses, are being radicalized by Islamist groups. Officials with knowledge of the move told the Times that federal funding, so the UAE's funding, is being limited for students who hope to study in the UK, citing concerns about the influence of the Muslim Brotherhood, amongst other issues. The group is prescribed as a terrorist organization in the UAE and in other Arab and Muslim majority countries, which has long campaigned for European nations to do the same. The Emirati government is not imposing a blanket ban, meaning richer families can still send their children. Stephen, this is an extraordinary story, isn't it?
Well, extraordinary, but not at all unexpected, I would say. I entered politics just a few years ago, effectively on an anti-sectarian ticket. I see growing society-wide problems with encroaching sectarianism, and one of the hotbeds is our universities, of course, the American universities and others across Europe as well. It does feel as if the truth or the reality has been inverted, doesn't it? And I think I know the Americans are acting more concertedly in relation to the Muslim Brotherhood specifically, and other similar organizations. Britain has always taken a much more cautious, non-prescriptive line. I think this should be, if there hasn't been before, a wake-up call to the British government, to the Home Office, to the Foreign Office, to look very, very closely at the Muslim Brotherhood and other similar organisations, and to be honest about the influences that they're having, even if it's a bit galling for the UAE to be telling us this truth, we should be listening to them. We should be listening to them, and other similar countries, as you've said. And I'm going to add one footnote, which is I'm a alumnus of University College London, and I noticed that it's there in the list of universities with some of the highest numbers, erstwhile numbers of UAE students. But I note just a couple of months ago, in late 2025, there was a little bit of a scandal of a lecturer, a fixed-term contract lecturer, who was filmed and then exposed as stating some very unacceptable anti-Semitic things.
Yeah, so, not just the students; it's some of the staff and faculty.
It is staff. It's the staff as well. So I think the time is right, really, for a dose of honesty, a real dose of honesty about the baleful influence, actually, of some of these organisations infiltrating and gaining a foothold in our universities. Time for that sort of level of honesty.
Yeah, I mean, I really had to, as I said, when I introduced this article, I had to read it several times to actually believe what I was reading. that here we have the United Arab Emirates, a Gulf state, an Arab state, a member of the Arab League, and where Islam is the majority religion, worried about sending their students to British universities here because they're worried about them becoming radicalized by extremist Islamist groups.
Yes.
I mean, it's a sad comment, isn't it?
Yes, and it is. It's not just about a domestic issue. Clearly, it's an international issue already with the UAE making this comment and taking this action. But of course, American eyes are on Europe and possibly the UK, particularly in terms of its reliability as an ally. It's so I think there are, it's far from being a little local difficulty to resolve. It's about our international reputation.
Yeah, I think to a great extent it is, and a very concerning story. Stephen, thank you. Okay, we're going to have a quick break now, and we're going to look at some of the other shows available here on Unprecedented TV, particularly Claire Dyer with Dire Consequences, and we'll take that break right now. Thank you, studio. Okay, so that's Claire Dyer with Dire Consequences. Okay, last two stories, and as ever, we try and put a slightly humorous one or a slightly light-hearted one in as the last story. So our penultimate, second to last story, this is from the Mirror, and it's to do with the upcoming elections in May, those that are left that haven't been cancelled. And Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar is saying Keir should stay away to help Scottish Labour win. Labour's leader in Scotland yesterday insisted he can still win, but is not in denial about how unpopular the UK government is. Anna Sarwar said he intends to become First Minister of Scotland in defiance of his leader's national polling, and urged Keir Starmer not to get involved in campaigning. Nothing like making your own party leader and prime minister welcome, is there? Stephen, what do you think? I mean, are the SDP active? Have you got going to have any candidates in Scotland and Wales?
Yes, we are going to stand in both Scotland and Wales for the for Holyrood and the Senedd. But I mean, you introduced it by saying the last story would be an amusing one. I find this one quite amusing as well. That there's a battle of words breaking out between the Scottish Labour leader and Keir Starmer, and I think that's only going to get worse over the next few months. Sarwar is going to plough his own furrow. He's going to distance himself as far as he can. He's obviously going to try and make sure he's as contrasting as possible in another sphere with the SNP, his main opposition. But it isn't going to be just Sarwar who's saying this. There'll be others at county council level, local district authority level, and I'm sure in Wales too, who will be saying, Keir, take a holiday, please, because actually this is not helping us.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I think the elections in certainly London, Wales and Scotland, no one's managed to cancel those yet, coming up in May. I think they'll tell us a lot. I think Reform have got a chance of winning in Wales, and I think it's quite likely that in Scotland and in Wales, Labour and the Conservatives may well come third and fourth. So one of them is going to have to come fourth. There's even a suspicion the Conservatives might come fifth in Scotland. I mean, can either Starmer or Badenoch survive, Stephen, if that's the case?
Well, there's plenty of talk about them being ejected, being sort of held in place until the until May, and in the bloodbath that there must surely be amongst both parties. There'll be questions. I'm not going to bet on either or both being ousted. There's a little bit of be careful what you wish for. Especially when it comes to the Labour government and who would follow as Prime Minister. It might be out of the frying pan into the fire for all we know. But the truth is, I can't remember a time in my life where both of the previously major parties were on the ropes to the extent that they are. Badenoch is, I think, putting up a gallant fight. She's performing well at PMQs. But it's obviously not really moving the dial. Certainly not anywhere near back to even the 20% in the opinion polls. That was even a low mark just a few months ago.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I think the only vague kind of precedent, Stephen, is as you said earlier, some of our older, more mature viewers and listeners will remember the early 80s with the SDP.
Yes.
And some of the by-election wins. Was it Crosby, Glasgow Hill Head? Does my memory serve me correctly?
Yes, Jenkins in Hill Head and Shirley Williams at Crosby back in the day. Yes,
81, 82, the SDP briefly led in the opinion polls, but Labour was still second. Now we have, quite extraordinary situations, certainly in Wales and Scotland, where Plaid and Reform and the SNP and Reform in Scotland seem to be polling 1 and 2. Some opinion polls where neither Labour nor the Conservatives can get even to 20%. They're in the teens. I mean, this is we're in uncharted political waters, aren't we?
Well, I think so. I mean, there's a phrase that's used, cleavage politics, which is the politics of affiliation, a group affiliation very broadly. And I think we really are seeing an epochal change in affiliations. It's no longer lending your vote so much as and then reverting, let's say, to the status quo ante. I just don't think there's any way back now. And I really do want to see as do so many who are effectively politically disenfranchised from the previously mainstream parties, an absolute once and for all shattering of the old two-party system, whether or not the electoral system changes as a result of it, but never again the hegemony, the dual hegemony that we saw. So we too want to see that happen, and I think then the electoral landscape will be a really fascinating place. It'll be unenviable for any party in any sort of whether it's regional, local, or even eventually national. It's not as if it's going to be a sort of a shiny legacy that's left for any ruling party to build on. But I think it's a necessary fracturing, necessary reckoning that we all want to see.
Yes, I mean it's an irony, isn't it? Is that despite first past the post Brexit, our politics is becoming more fractured. It's becoming more European, and as you mentioned earlier, Stephen, it's becoming more sectarian.
Yes,
I think we will see. We've got the 4 Gaza independents plus Jeremy Corbyn already. I think we'll see more of that at the next election.
Yes.
I do worry we're going in a bit of a Northern Ireland kind of direction, but we're in unprecedented times. We really are. I think people will not miss the old Punch and Judy show of Labour and the Conservatives.
Yes, and one thing I would add, I did a visiting fellowship at a Hungarian university recently, an English-speaking one, fortunately, even though I'm ethnically Hungarian and I'm not fully bilingual. About the state of democracy, and one of the things I'm encouraged by is it were political party formation within the democratic sphere, and I think that's a sign that actually democracy is in rude health. it's the, if there's any sign that the institutions of this country are trying to find ways of banning some of these political parties, or reducing airtime, or in some other ways disadvantaging them, that would be a very, very bad thing. But I think political party formation and a sort of general churn in this era is a really healthy sign. And it just means that Labour and the Conservatives have to put up a fair fight rather than relying on effectively oligopoly status.
Yes, where one is the government, the other is always the opposition.
Yes,
that's been a cozy arrangement for too long.
Yes,
between the two front benches. Sorry,
yes, I don't want to cut across you, but the Gilbert and Sullivan song that some people may remember back in that day, in the late Victorian era, it was, every child is born a conservative or a liberal. I can't remember the line exactly. Of course, yes. Labour took over from the Liberals.
Every child born alive is either a conservative or a yes.
There we are. So
whichever musical it came from.
Yes, I can't remember. HMS Pinnacle, I can't remember, but whichever it was, we want to put that to bed, and
we do.
There should no longer be a sense in which anyone's vote is owned by any political party for any reason whatsoever. They have to earn it.
And I think it's, the rise of Reform and Farage is, absolutely fascinating. I was quite involved with UKIP back in the day. It's interesting. If you look at, I'm a sort of boring git who watches Prime Minister's Question Times most weeks. You can see at PMQs how Labour and Starmer are regarding Farage as the de facto, the way that they skew their questions to have a pop at him. The contempt with which Starmer obviously regards Badenoch, they are now regarding Farage as the de facto leader of the opposition. And I mean, I think it's now probably 80% plus that after the next election, I think Reform will either be the government, or they'll be in government in some guise, or they will be the opposition. I think it's quite possible, even if they don't win outright, that they'll win more seats than the Tories. The next election is going to be absolutely fascinating. Do you think?
Well, for sure. I think it's a very, very, every week things are changing, so it's a very long time between now and 2029 if this Labour government, supposedly impregnable with its majority as it is, actually makes it that far. But there's still a lot of time. But I think it would take a very strange set of circumstances for something like that not to arise. And if it does mean a shattering once and for all of the two-party system, so much the better.
Yeah, good stuff. Okay, thank you for your input there, Stephen. Okay, so folks, thanks for bearing with. We come to our final story. We always try and make it a slightly humorous. This is from The Sun. Put 1 billion adults on jabs. Doctors' global fat call. 1 billion people, that's 1 person in 8 roughly on the planet, should be put on weight loss jabs to tackle the global obesity crisis, doctors have suggested. 1 in 4 adults would benefit from the treatment, they say. Flab is now a bigger threat than famine for the first time, as UNICEF, the UN agency, last year confirmed more children are overweight than underweight, and the number of obese people topped 1 billion in 2024 and is set to double by 2050. Analysts from the Boston hospital suggest 27% of adults are already fat enough to be eligible for jabs. And that's not just in the USA and the UK. That is worldwide, Stephen. Can you see 1 billion of us on the weight loss jabs?
Well, I was trying to work out how to respond to this this story. I look at there's a quote from the study author. These medicines have allowed us to understand that biology is much more powerful. That may be true on a technical sense. I really worry about mass medicalization of the population for any reason, this included. I think that it is corrosive of agency. It's corrosive of individual decision making. It's corrosive of the value of education, in this case, towards healthy living. So I wouldn't automatically want to go down that path at all. I mean, to the extent that our party, which I absolutely subscribe to, has a view, it's about the importance of education. But it's very much about the importance of a healthy food chain that yields healthy alternatives to the ultra processed foods that are behind some of this. The curtailing in some cases of the monopoly or oligopoly power of supply into the food processing markets and retail and so on. So I would tend to approach it from that angle. We need to look back at what the sort of food that arrives on people's plates, and equipping people to make healthier decisions. I mean, that might sound a little bit patronizing, a little bit nanny state-ish, but I don't think yielding to mass injections is the right way forward. I just don't think it is, for the reasons I've offered.
I'd sort of broadly agree there, Stephen. I think people go for the jabs because it's quick and easy. As I understand it, they're not available on the NHS. You have to subscribe privately, and apparently you can see a doctor online, for which of course you pay for the privilege, and he or she will then very happily issue you a prescription, in return for their fee. And there's no long-term, what long-term studies are there about the effects of being on these jabs? And I gather if you come off them, you put the weight back on pretty quickly. There's that's not Mr. Creosote, is it? With
certainly a close cousin.
Yes. I gather you put the weight back on pretty quickly. And so I'd have some concerns. I mean, you can't ban this kind of thing. That's a bit too much. But no doubt the next step will be demands for them to be available free or taxpayer funded, as I prefer to say, on the NHS. Yes.
And for sure, a business case that would suggest that that's the most cost-effective way of treating the symptoms. And nor am I wanting to ban it. I think there will be cases where actually this is a very reasonable thing to prescribe. So in no way am I saying we should say it should not be available. But I think in the end. And I'll use this word. I think it's a lazy policy. It's a lazy policy which plays into the hands of pharmaceutical companies and plays into a narrative that we are the victims of circumstances, effectively, of our biological circumstances.
Yeah. Well, I would have my reservations as well. Well, Stephen, look, great show, and just remind us again where people can find the Social Democratic Party, of which you are the national chair.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, sdp.org.uk. You'll find everything about us, our policies and our principles, and hopefully plenty to like. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to wrap up the show now. Thank you again, Stephen, for coming on. Okay, folks, if you've borne with us right to the end, really appreciate it. Hope you can join us again, and hope you found the stories useful. And so we'll wind up with the end of another show of Tim Scott Uncancelled with me, Tim Scott. And thank you for watching, folks, and we'll hope to see you next time.